What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This week I'm back for a new video and this time I have Benza. So I use his track Back To as a main reference but also some more recent stuff. Be sure to check the project file in the link in the description. Thank you guys so much for the support and now let's get into it. So I'm gonna first show you the kick bass. This is how it sounds. You see it's a kind of a mix of a rumble kick with some bass going on underneath. It's a bit of a mess how I did it, but just focus maybe on the method. Basically I made some groups of groups, but I first started with this one, which is the main group. I'm going to show you all the layers. First, I have the punch here, which is made from 3 layers. So the pattern is not really like a 4x4. There's a little variation like this, and also on the second bar. And here I'm basically using first a low punch. So I'm low passing this sample here. And I'm also cutting here with the fader the transient. And this is going to be my low punch, and I have 2 layers of mid punch, which are basically some 909 kicks, and this one. So I'm also compressing here. What I want for this kick is really something compressed and saturated, especially in the low mids, because there's not going to be so much things going around in the high end. These kicks are not too bright. I really want something compressed to have that punch in the mid. So together it's grouped this. I'm also using the amp here. I'm cutting those frequencies that are a bit resonating, especially here, the boxiness. So this is my main punch. I then have a rumble here. So I'm using, as usual, my FX Subverb sample, which is from Ableton. And here I'm just using it like this. I'm also adapting here since I have 2 punches to make sure I don't have a clash in sub. I'm sidechaining. I'm actually changing here the length of that kickstart to make sure I don't have here. So this is my rumble kick. I then want to emphasize a bit here the bass. So I'm adding that sub sign here. So really just something here in the bass, 100 Hz. And I have also here a variation with a tom, also in the bass. As you can see, I don't want this bright sound, so that's why I cut like this. And together it creates that rumble kick. So this is how it sounds. For now, it's pretty straightforward. I have that little variation, but I do want more movement. And the way I'm going to create that is adding more groovy layers. So I'm going to use here my kick punch that I use here as a sample. And I'm creating this pattern with some velocity movement. And again, I'm muffling this through an EQ to have only those bass frequencies. I distort a bit and I sidechain. I put it in mono. So these are going to interact with the rumble bass and create some phase constellation and some movement. And I have also another one. This one is straight from a percussive loop. So it sounds like this at first, but basically I'm just only using the bass movement here. And it's going to create something way more moving than just the rumble bass that I have first. And so together, then it's going to sound way better. Without it. You see it really adds that movement, that techno movement. And then adding also 2 layers to have a bit more mid kick and top kick. So this one here, just a top kick layer. I use only the distorted mid part. And I have also this top kick straight sample from Ableton. And I use here the transient. So it's way more punchy. And so those two groups, so I had my first group, which was compressed and distorted by this inflator and this OTT. I have also a clipper here. I make sure I don't have too much bass, which was the case, so it was clipping a bit. And then I just used the same kind of chain, so Oxford inflator, OTT, also a bit of control of the wideness, make sure my bass is in mono here, bit of amp, and then final layer to add the transient. And there you go, that's how I made this kick. I then make a few variations, so these are some auto filters for my transitions. I also use some variation in the kick punches, and that's basically how I did this kick bass. So now if we look at the drums, I first have a clap. The claps of Benza are usually very sharp. Something pretty short. Here I'm using 2 layers. I have a first layer of clap here, which is in the 808. Pretty bright, but I don't keep those very harsh frequencies because overall the mastering and the way the track sounds in Benza track, it's a bit like darker. So you have to make sure it's not too bright. Here I'm using this 808 clap, so slight reverb. I'm just using some kickstart to cut the length of the clap. And I'm adding another one here, which is more for the transient, because if you look at it here, I'm lacking a bit of that transient. So I use this to make it even more snappy. So it's another sample, but I use also some compression here. So with the transient shaper, I boost the attack, I cut the sustain, and that way I just have the first part with a very clappy sound. And together it's gonna make something more snappy. So I have group processing also, lots of drive coming from this clipper, so basically saturation, even more compression here with the transient shaper, withdrawing the sustain, and a final reverb just to give it a bit more room. I then make sure I don't have harsh frequencies with that sus2 that I use on every channel, and I have a final drum bus just to glue all together the 2 layers. And that's it for this clap. I then have my drums. For the drums I have several kind of drums. Some hi-hats, some open hats, swing loops, top loops that's gonna throw some reverb here and there. So first I have the straightforward classic close hat. So again, I'm layering. Layering is always a good thing to do for your hats, for your drums, just to get them a bit more thick, more rich in terms of frequencies and harmonics. So what I do here is I make a combination of 2 hi-hats, and I use also this little sample here when the kick plays, but this I'm gonna actually sidechain it, but still with the reverb, it gets the movement from it. So it's more interesting than just the open hat like this. So that's why I do that. And so I have this open hat, so it's just a sample. Sample selection is really important here. I chose something snappy that was rich in frequency. And here again, I make sure it's not too bright. It was a bit harsh here. I sidechain, I compress to have something not too harsh in the transient using sus2. And I make the same thing here. I'm just adding a bit more delay. Here it's not the same pitch, so I'm using this to make more attack from my open hat, and then it's the same chain, and all together then I'm adding also this room, and then some final EQs. And for my EQs I usually do always the same, so I have some harsh frequencies around 10k here in that area. So if you solo it, see, it can be harsh for your ears. You have also around 4k, usually it resonates. And here I can see visually sometimes some resonances that can be a bit too much. So that's why I cut it here. So this is the first one. Next I have a top hat, like a top loop. This is to get a bit more movement. It gives a bit more drive. So what I do here is I just found a hi-hat loop, but to get that very short and snappy stuff, before it was like this, you can put a transient here when you warp it, and you put here unidirectional and you put it down. That way it's gonna isolate all the transient here and it's gonna take really that first tiny part. So you're really gonna get just those very sharp high frequencies. And then I'm just using the same chain as the other drums. So same reverb, just controlling my sustain here, EQing a bit of those harsh frequencies and side chaining. I have another one here. So this one is more like a grainy type of ambience stuff. It's not really like a drum that I use like this. So I just took like a small part of a sample and then I just shift it down a lot. I think I actually pitch it up. You see it was a hat. I pitch it up, pitch it down with the shifter to get interesting textures, and then everything is just made by this groove, delay, and the reverb to create something grainy like this. Then I make sure, you see it was too harsh, that's why I EQ like this, and I make sure it's properly sidechained after all. So this one is more like a ambient texture actually. Next I have the open hat. This one is pretty straightforward. So it's just the basic 909 open hat from Ableton. I just transpose this down. I cut the lens tail also. For something more snappy. Same drum air reverb, same room reverb, and then EQing also here, big resonancy, and I don't want those harsh frequencies. And then just sidechaining, final delay, I think it was giving a bit more movement with it. So that's why I put it. Next I have here another open hat, actually a closed hat. Again, that moving pattern. So sometimes in groove tracks you have two open hats or two closed hats in the same track, because usually in techno tracks you have one and you keep it for the tracks all along, but sometimes you have some transitions or some other closed hat that are stacking up together. So this time I made another one so that at my drop I still keep a closed hat rhythm, but I have a different one. I'm just gonna keep entertain the audience. So you have this one and you have this one. And this one is just made from another sample and just the same processing again than my open hat. But this one is it's just a closed hat. I have also something that I call the swing loop. So again, just to give a bit more movement. So if you listen to it, sometimes it's nice to throw a loop like this. Again, I'm using the transient technique, so without it, it was just a house loop like this. So you choose preserve transient, unidirectional, and then you put it down. I was at 22. And it's gonna only keep the transient, and it's gonna make something moving like this. Finally, I have a ride. This one is more also like a random ride. I don't use it as a straightforward drum, but more as something that plays randomly, some stuff like this. So I just cut the transient here and I put a very long reverb. I'm actually using the return channel here that I put always at this level. And for my return channel, I use the endless mile because I like this very airy reverb. It's gonna trigger here and play it. And for my group processing, I'm just using a slight drum bus to glue everything together, a slight groove, delay, and just a final sidechain to make sure I don't have any clash in case I missed it on some of the channels. And that's it for the drums. Next up, I have some Foley sounds. So basically call and answer, but with some kind of texture or perks or stuff like this. So I have 3 layers here. I'm using first this perk loop. So it was a long perk loop, but I actually isolated just 3 perks like this. And then I'm just stacking some delays and controlling here, especially the stereo, because I had too much stereo information. So you can switch here between this and mono and stereo mode. That way you can edit some mono EQ and some stereo EQ, and you can make sure you have like actually 2 different stages where you can put your EQs in the mono and in the stereo. So I have this first perk. I then have a Foley sound. So here it's a pitch down perk loop. Something random that I just took, that I pitched down, and then I add some delay. And just a final Foley, and again with some groove. So call, answer, and so on. Here. I have also some noise movements, so this is very important in some Benza tracks. It's using some textures that plays along with the kick. So to make some texture, I usually use the same kind of technique that I always do, is I take like random noise sweeps, Foley sounds or texture, and then I just pitch down to get more dark vibe. So I get more dark vibe from this pitch down effect, and then I'm just stacking up some grain delays and some filter delays or delays so that it gates and creates those moving texture. So you see, as I pitch it down a lot, that's why I EQ like this, because I created lots of noise in the low frequencies. I just EQ a lot, and if I need, I can then boost it back, because of course of those EQs, I don't have too much noise in the high end because I pitch it down a lot. And so I just make sure I keep only the noisy crackling texture that I want. There's also a good plugin on Ableton if you want just a kind of texture. It's called vinyl distortion, and basically you can just use it straight from it. And you can create some texture like this. You can use this, you can add some delay to make it a bit more wavy. There you go, you have some texture. So here I'm using this noise. So this one is repeating itself like every 2 bars. And I have a call and response also here with these 2 texture. So this one is a gate, like a reverb gate. So again, I pitch it down, I EQ, I use grain delays. And you can get different texture like this. And I have an answer here. Again, a pitch down Foley sound with a grain delay. Could have used this also. Same technique, but you can get infinite amount of texture with those. Just switch samples, just pitch it down, up, use another grain delay, use 5 grain delays if you want, and you're gonna get something interesting. And this is going to play this noise movement texture, and to make it repetitive, I can use some effects like a chorus here, or like a filter, an auto filter with a slow LFO rate here, and it's gonna move like this and ensure the noise is moving a bit. Okay, so now I have my leads, and what I call as a leads is basically at the drop several sounds playing also a call and response, all them together. So in the track back 2 is using those kind of sound. So first I have this vocal, so it's a pitch down vocal. Enter the void, enter the void. So at first the vocal glitch like this, and I pitch it down with the grand delay, and then same kind of technique with those Foley sound, noise movement. I just make it more dark with this, adding a bit more reverb, creating movement with the auto filter, and then just EQing because I want something dark, and of course no bass here. I'm gonna have here also a bit more distortion on the group. I'm gonna have this sidechain here to make sure it doesn't clash, so that's why I didn't put a sidechain here. So this is the first sound. I have another one here which is a chord. So here I'm just using chord dub keys, which is a preset from Ableton, creating a chord like this, a minor chord, to keep it dark, and then again putting some chorus, sidechaining so that it's not too bright. And then I have a Foley, so it's just a part of a sample that I then use like this, so just delay and reverb to make it more dynamic. I have then an FM shot, so it uses also lots of FM sound. So here just took a shot, random FM shot, and then just sidechaining and putting a cut in the lows. Then a triplet of FM bass. So again, Ableton preset FM choke bass. And here I'm just using it like this. Yeah, that's pretty much it for these leads, but then I can create some variations. So I can change, for instance, the pitch here when it plays. I think that's what I did with the house synths. So I pitch it down like this. Also here, after the second drop, I'm adding like a second one. Also adding some delay on the second one with the return channel. I can also make some variation with some Foley sound. And yeah, that's how I did those leads. And then final pad here, which is almost the same as back to. So what I do, I'm using Serum. I took a random pad in the preset, but then I'm creating something more dark with that low cut filter, which is pretty heavy. I'm creating that dissonant chord, +5, +6, also here. And here I make it a full-on pad with that reverb. And then I just make sure, as it's lots of variation in the harmonics, a good way to EQ this is to use dynamic EQ, because these are going to move up and down, so you can control at every time of the track and to make some specific EQ. So the best way to do that is to isolate the resonating frequencies and put on a dynamic EQ, so that each time it triggers it, if the volume goes up, it's gonna be put down by those EQs. So this is really a good tool. And then I'm just opening up here the filter to create that tension until it's released before the drop. And then I bring it back. So that's how I made this dissonant pad. And the final elements are the effects. Basically, it's more noisy backgrounds or moving things in the background. So I have first this vocal that you've just heard, which is for my drop. It's again some kind of a housey vibe vocal with a big reverb on. I have an effect here that I stack up to make more tension. So it's a random effect that I just pitch down, and then I'm using also the grand delay again to make it more dark and create some noise like this. I have also this reverse vocal here that I'm using. It's just actually the same vocal that I use here. I just put down the reverb here to 100%. I bounce it to audio, and then I just got this to reverse it. Again, to create that transition. I have this bass shot effect. So at first, without those effects, it was a bass shot like this. But when you pitch it down, instantly you get those crackling texture, and then you just have to boost it up and add some delay, grand delay, and you can create those. And you can play with the pitch, different pitch at different times to keep the same vibe, but to have some differences and to make it more interesting. So I made another bass shot here, other pitches, and that's how I did it. Then it's just same technique, but just another kind of sample or effect. Again, pitch down, sample, another part of that sample here, but here it's pitched up. You can also dewarp it. So as you can see, it was a really sharp sample. I can pitch it down, then warp it, and then I can repitch it up. And it's gonna create those nasty textures. And a final effect here, but same processing. Just again, other kind of effect. I just change a bit the grain delay, so that's why I create those different channels. And just final sidechain on the group. Alright guys, that's it for this track. I hope you liked it. Thank you guys so much for your supports and see you in the next one. Ciao guys.